Jeff, we were talking about Lords a second ago. Just wanted to come back to the test over the weekend and the fact that the attendance at Lords on the fourth day only had four figures. It was 9,000 and something, I think, by the time they finished there. Just wanted to make 2 points about that, and I'm sure you'll have a view as well. They're separate issues. The pricing of test match tickets in England is just out of kilter with expectations, I think, from the society about going to events. I know that people paid 380 quid to go and see Oasis in the Ticketek price surging this week, but that's not a good thing. That's exploitative, that model. And I think that across the board, Test cricket has been priced in this country in such a way that it makes it very difficult for families to go. And you throw on top of that all the other all the external costs if you don't live in the same city as the test that's being played, and it becomes unachievable if you're living on a normal wage in a working class household. I don't believe that's right. Issue one, let's deal with that, and absolutely let's target that. Let's put pressure on that. Issue two, about what happened on day 4, I did feel some sympathy for MCC, because what are you meant to do? You're meant to go, well, 7,000 people have paid their fucking ridiculous amounts of money to go. You can't then say night before, everyone come in for free now. Like, that's not procedurally fair. What we need to do on part 2 is have an acceptance. And Guy Lavender, who's the outgoing chief executive of MCC, said this, that the ticket pattern buying pattern for test matches that England play at home has changed since Bazball, and especially when they're playing not India and not Australia. Day 4 of test matches last year were being sold out. Day 4 of test matches next year in India here, they'll sell out as well. It's the other 2 summers when they're going to have to think more creatively about what does day 4 represent when so many test matches aren't even making it to day 4. You can't sell them for full freight or anything close to it, or you'll be left disappointed and bewildered like we were on Sunday when we saw Lords 3/4 empty on a day when it should have been full.
A couple of things I'd say here. One, saying that future people should have a level of disregard or injustice applied to them because previous people have also had to go through it is not a good argument. It's like the argument against saying you can't forgive student debt because other people have already paid it off. Okay, so the counter to that is that you should keep applying a shitty situation to other people into the future. That doesn't make sense to me. That's
not really what I'm arguing. I'm saying that you can't, like, I don't think it's procedurally fair to the night before go, fuck it, we're going to throw the gates open. Like, I think that, like, they should have realised this.
But that's
this
not
should have been
problem.
realised. But they could have. I guess what I'm saying, they could have identified this issue 3 weeks ago, right? And 3 weeks ago, right, we've got a problem here. Let's find a creative solution. Let's think about how we can rebate people who've paid the full freight. There would have been a way through. There would have been a way through this that would have been dynamic and outside the square, which would have made something creative possible for day 4 here. But I can also understand they might have thought, well, fuck it, there may not be a day 4. We could go to all this effort for nothing because England are winning test matches or getting to a point where they're over in 3 days anyway. That's the bigger issue with the current season that we're in, that they're just not making the journey.
Or more likely, there might have been half a day on day 4 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So they could have worked out a method to send to refund 30% of it or whatever it might be, or give people who bought tickets something else. You know, here you get first chance to buy tickets for the thing next year or something.
Yeah, something like that.
There might be paths through it. The problem that they've got is like the thing that we were talking about on the weekend, where the cheapest adult ticket was 95 quid, and most of them are more like 130 and 140. And you talk about the Oasis thing, you talk about Ticketek, Ticketmaster. Like these are some of the most fucking morally bankrupt, shitty, evil companies in the world. All they do is exploit happiness and goodwill and joy. All they do is put a tax on people trying to experience some sort of happiness in that way. They're completely exploitative. They've bought up. They have vested interest in so many of the venues and stadiums and places where big acts play, so that even a band like Oasis probably don't have a lot of control over it, because if they want to play a big enough venue, they have to go through the established ticket monopoly. They have no choice but to do that. And then people get screwed out of 400 euros for a ticket in Ireland or whatever it is. Test cricket has to realise that, and I say this as somebody who loves Test cricket more than most things in the world. Test cricket is not that good. Test cricket is not a Bruce Springsteen concert. Test cricket is not an Oasis concert. One day of Test cricket, like if you're like you and me and you're lucky enough to go to all of the days of all of the Test matches, then we get the good moments. We get the payoff. We get Shamar Joseph on day 4. We get Rishabh Pant chasing it down at the Gabba. We get Edgbaston day 5 with Cummins and Lyon. We have those moments, but it's a gamble. If you're going to a test match as a punter, you're going to one day because it's outrageously expensive. You might get, I saw Dananjaya de Silva make 62 and I saw Gus Atkinson take 2 wickets. That's not worth 150 quid. I'm sorry, it's not. It's not that day of entertainment. It doesn't tally with the kind of incredibly distorted price value that England specifically puts on Test cricket. And Australia was going that way, and they did row it back a bit, Cricket Australia a few years ago, and it is possible to get some family tickets and some kids tickets that are a bit cheaper, but they are going back the other way again. So, there are a lot of tickets are outrageously expensive in Australia as well. You cannot charge that kind of money for something that is not that kind of experience, because you cannot guarantee someone a great experience at the cricket. You can't guarantee a great day at the cricket. There are lots of pedestrian days at the cricket, and that's fine. That's part of what Test cricket is, and that's why it's a good sport to watch on TV. But it is not a reasonable gamble to ask an ordinary person, particularly an ordinary family, to take to risk 400, 500 pounds bringing a couple of adults plus several children to come to a day of Test cricket. It is not a fair ask, because you are not like for like. You may see yourselves as great high-level entertainment. You're not that level of entertainment. There has to be an understanding and a humility about what Test cricket is to understand that getting the audience in is more important than fleecing them for every pound you can get. And I genuinely think it's disgraceful. And I know that the MCC do a lot of good, but this pricing and pricing in England, particularly across the last 10 years or so, is a genuine disgrace, and it is unjustifiable, and they need to have a very, very hard look at that ethically, not just practically.
And look, there's always those who will say, okay, well, if it's not worth that, then why do we sell it out? If it's not, the market will dictate what it's worth. Well,
because you favour rich people. Because this sport favours rich people. Because this sport is skewed towards the wealthy. Privilege rules, and so people will pay it if a big contest is on. But that just means that it excludes everybody who can't afford to do that, and I think that's wrong.
And I know that stadia in this country is smaller than it is in Australia. So when we use the reflexive argument that, well, when I was a kid, I got to go to Test cricket, and I was really lucky to do so because it was fundamentally cheaper. That's because there wasn't the demand to sell out MCG on, well, any day of Test cricket. I mean, save for about 5 in our lifetime or something like that. We're lucky that we are from a place with a massive stadium. But I think about, kids who live in London who were just from normal, ordinary working class households and families, like my family when I was growing up. There is simply no way that me could have been taken to Test cricket as a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old if the pricing was set up the way that it is in England now, accounting for inflation, accounting for currency and all the rest of it. There is no way in the world my parents could have afforded that or justified that, because they were too busy putting food on the table, paying a mortgage and so on and so forth. So it's not an MCC thing in isolation. It's an England thing. It's everywhere. And I know some venues, it varies venue to venue. I know it's not all the same, but culturally it's the same. The extortionate amounts of money that are charged for Test cricket, that is a uniform problem. And it's something that I think that if we're talking about the game that needs to do better, to the ICEC report last year, it wasn't just racism. It wasn't just sexism, it was classism. And
it was cultural exclusion. Yeah, and that is cricket's problem.
And I do think that the classism, the other ism in all of that, and the ICEC report is augmented by ticket prices. Yep. Jeff, I'll throw in one more thing before we break. There has been so much out of that report. There has been so much desperation almost, and some goodwill and some willingness from the ECB and so on to say we need to open up the sport. We don't want people to think that cricket's just a posh sport for rich people. And so they've got these programs to try to open it up. But that ticket price, that is the most obvious, tangible number. The ticket price and the pay TV subscription to watch it are the things that tell you that it is a posh sport. It is for rich people. Any program you do gets undermined by the most basic price signals, and those are the two most important ones in the game. And the balance to that would be there's plenty of days of cricket that cost a tenner to get into, and if you want to go watch the 100 at Lord's, you can have your Lord's Day, but it's not. I mean, when the ICC press release today, did Jeff Allardyce, and I think Lord's had a release to the same effect. the prestige form of the game, the pinnacle of the sport. That's why we've always argued that women should get the chance to play Test cricket, because not just us, but everyone uses that refrain that Test cricket is the peak of the sport. Well, if it's the peak of the sport and we're telling people that, then the discounted price is something that's not deemed the peak of the sport. Anyway, I think we're now very much in our echo chamber. We have to get to a break, but we will return. We have more stuff to do for This Is the Final Word. Segment 3, final word. We've got about 5 minutes till I've got to go and get Peggy and Winnie from nursery, so we're not going to be able to do loads and loads here. But the Big Bash drafts were held in the week, Jeff. I'm not going to pretend that I know too much about how the Big Bash draft works. I know that Ben Duckett in the men's went number 1. I suppose he's kind of like the Luke Hodge of our time, which probably makes James Vince, Luke Ball, and Laurie Evans, Chris Judd. Anyway, for you footy fans out there.
Not sure about that. Not sure that Laurie Evans and Chris Judd really goes together. I suppose there's a WA. They both played in Perth, didn't they?
I don't know, mate, if I'm honest with you.
Well, I'm pretty sure Laurie Evans played for the Scorchers, but he's at the Renegades now.
Jacob Bethel, he's the one to watch out of all of this. He's the one who Maxie's very keen on. He worked with him very closely at Birmingham last year. So Bethel has been named in the England squad for the White Ball Internationals against Australia. I think he's in both the T20 and the one-day squad. So really looking forward to seeing him go about it. The 21-year-old from Birmingham. Stack of English players, men and women. Interesting bit here.
So many English. They're like almost, it's like half the list or more is English in both the men's and the women's, it seems.
And there's a bit going on here, right? So I would imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but won't the English men who are really good at T20 cricket simply go to the higher paying comp halfway through in South Africa or in the UAE? Isn't that just like a fait accompli that the guys who are being paid the biggest bucks are most likely to end up going? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're paying them enough now that they can keep them in situ.
So the way I read it is that the Big Bash is attracting the tier of players who are just slightly down from that, who are not. They're not the biggest marquee names, so they're probably not first choice in the SA20 or whatever it is, where you've got overseas player caps and so on. So that's where that's why Paul Walter is sliding in at that level, or Laurie Evans, or there's a few New Zealanders, Colin Munro. Finn Allen is the kind who might be picked up by an SA 20 side, something like that. But yeah, Ollie Pope's there, Chris Jordan's there, Sam Billings is there. It's an England fest, and there's a few West Indies players. Akil Hussain is someone who might be in demand. Fabian Allen's coming out. Shafane Rutherford's coming out. But yeah, it's a very, very English heavy system.
Finn Allen, you mentioned he was not taking a New Zealand contract. It's funny that. So he probably will fuck off, and and that's his prerogative. I guess that's how these things work. Sounds like you've got a machine going off, or a fire alarm going off for you.
Yeah, somebody just won $14 or something.
Greg Shippard said they should just stop the draft. So he's gone full Vietnam. Stop the draft. I'm not sure. I don't know why exactly. I didn't read the yarn, but I did see the headline on Twitter. It shows how much attention
Shippy and Archbishop Mannix. They always thought they were politically connected.
Desmond Tutu. The Hobart women got Danny White at number 1, but they had like 3 cracks at other players who then went on to be retained by their club. I don't quite know how that works, but Danny White.
Okay, so you've got it's like a match system. So a club has pick 1, but a club who someone's played for before can then choose to match that with their first pick, I think, and retain the player. So
it's like father-son.
Eccleston, so Eccleston actually went number 1 to the Sixers. Heather Knight went to the Thunder because she's played with them so much before, and Laura Woolbart went to the Strikers. And so those were Hobart's first 3 shots, which might make the relationship interesting with Danny Wyatt. They're like, there's no you're our silver medal. It's like you're our 4th place finish.
Yeah.
You rounded out the quadrella.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she's off to the Hobart Hurricanes. Just on the England players there on that one, they are being made to go to South Africa and not finish the Big Bash, which, I mean, this is not what happened when the WPL was bashing about in. You remember they arrived in New Zealand late, I think it was, because they were going to... Now, is this a precedent from England? Does this mean that England would do a similar thing if the WPL... was clashing?
I don't think so.
I think this might be...
Why would you... And I thought there was generally a sort of tacit agreement to not schedule international series overlapping the WBBL.
Yeah. Interesting. So these unofficial windows that aren't always completely honoured. And that was the case in early Big Bash cricket, wasn't it, with the South African internationals invariably missing the business end. Other players who are bashing around, I'll mention Sophie Devine. She's picked number 8 for the Scorchers, one of these retained players. She's finishing up as captain of the New Zealand women's T20 side after the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see that she's determined to crack on with the one-day team. I mean, I know they do need to have some generation change there at some point, but Devine continues to be their most consistent player. And that'll mean that she won't go full-time on the T20 circuit, which would be her other option. So that's where she's going. And on the World Cup, Heather Knight during the week saying that they are preparing themselves for empty stadiums for the World Cup in the UAE, which is a bit grim because it would have been great in Bangladesh. I mean, I know it's, nothing we can do about it now, but they would have had terrific crowds there for that World Cup, but that's not to be. So Heather Knight, who, as you said before, is going to be back with the Sydney Thunder as a platinum retention pick.
Platinum retention picks. Just throwing a couple more here. Amelia Kerr off to the Sydney Sixers. Feels like that had to happen at some point. The Hollywood side of the WBBL had to get New Zealand's remaining big, bright talent. So she's off there. There's a bit of Indian influence as well. So Deepti Sharma's coming out for the Stars, who have been terrible for years. So maybe she can help turn them around. Jemima Rodriguez is coming out to play. The strikers were desperately trying to get some Rithi Mandana. At one point or other, Yastika Bhatia is coming out to play for the Stars as well. Mandana is going to the strikers because they set that up ahead of time. And then, you'll be very pleased to know, Orla Prendergast got signed.
Yes, I saw that.
She's playing for Adelaide.
Yeah, it's great news. Yeah, she's a fucking superstar. That'll add to her development a lot now. She's captained Ireland and had that match-winning turn against Sri Lanka a couple of weeks ago. Jeff, we're nearing the point where I've got to go, but let me do a few things. First of all, Cricket Australia, staying on domestic white ball cricket, are going to finally name the Mercantile Mutual Cup something after a player. I would have just gone with the Merc, but anyway, given it's going to be after a player and they're asking the crowd to, it's got to be Michael Bevan, doesn't it? Anything other than Michael Bevan, and I predict a riot.
Okay.
There are other players, but it's got to be Bevo, doesn't it? Given that the era when that was in its pomp, when that form of the game, when, remember Jeff, Sunday afternoons watching a game from North Sydney Oval, it's got to be Bevo, surely.
I'll throw in Bevan. So I cricket archived the shit out of this because I went down a rabbit hole. There was probably easier ways to find this, but Michael Bevan played in 9 one-day cup finals. Nine. And won 6.
Yeah.
And made significant scores in like half a dozen of them, including his only 100 in that format, and also won with Tassie after winning a bunch with New South Wales. So that is a very strong CV. The only thing I would say is that for me, and I think for a lot of people, Michael Bevan is more associated with one-day international cricket. So I would potentially argue that something like the One-Day Player of the Year medal should be like the Bevan Jones medal, because Dino and Bevo, they're more ODIs than they are domestic 50-over cricket.
Yeah.
Whereas so I thought maybe it should be more associated with someone who you think of primarily as a domestic player, and that's why I would suggest Brad Hodge, because he made 20 fucking centuries in that competition. 20. No one else made more than, I think the next best is 12. Most players, Bevo made 1. Most players didn't make more than 3 or 4. He made 20 of them. He made nearly twice as many runs as the next best player. He made over 5,000 runs in the format and averaged like 50-something. He played in 6 finals and he won 3 of them for the Vicks at a time when they were not nearly as strong as the New South Wales sides that Bevan was playing with. So if I was going, I'd like to see Bevan honoured, but I think he should be honoured at an ODI level, and that this should be an honour at a state level. Give it to a state player rather than someone who had a big Australian career, where Brad Hodge had a more limited Australian career.
You've done the work.
What do you think?
You've done the work. You've changed my mind with evidence. That's how it's meant to be. Fair enough. I mean, Bevo's like the Michael Tuck figure in all of this.
Yeah.
But Brad Hodge is the Lee Matthews. Does that work? Yeah, I think it does. Who's Don Scott in that follow-up? Anyway, I know we've not quite gotten around to the Rachel Hayhoe Flint or the county championship. Few things to note. We're 2 rounds to go in the Hayhoe. That'll be this week, so we'll do a big roundup on that. Jeff, you'll appreciate the fact that Eve Jones played 2 games last round for 2 separate teams. She went on loan to Lancashire halfway through the round, so she played for the Sparks, then played for the Thunder a couple of days later. So that's fun. I like that. And the county wrap, Essex blew their chance. They were playing Worcestershire at home and lost by 43 runs. A great win for Worcester. It has opened up the whole competition for Somerset. Somerset beat Durham by 293 runs. wickets for Jack Leach with the Kookaburra ball. A big through line of the round was spinners were taking wickets. There were a bunch of fifers for the slow men. Took 7 in the second innings, 5 in the first, Jack Leach, to bowl out Durham on the final day for 126 to get that thumping victory. Bryden Cast returning to cricket after his suspension, made 104 not out. Good on him for serving his time and coming back and doing well right away. But it means that the gap between Surrey, who drew at Trent Bridge on a road by the looks of things, massive scores there. Surrey are in the lead as I pull up my table.
193 to 169.
So what is that? Is that 24 points? It is 24 points.
Yeah,
24. That is the maximum amount of points in a round. That is the full. So if Somerset trouts Surrey this week at home and get all the points available, the 5 batting points, the 3 bowling points, to win the fucking thing, they would pull level with 2 rounds to go, which would be something. But Surrey are taking out some insurance against that. And Shakib, fresh from winning the test match in Pakistan, is off to Taunton on a 1-game deal. He's on his way between Pindi and India for that test series.
Yep.
Because Surrey are getting squeezed by the red ball players who are going to be busy with the test team. The white ball players are getting ready for the international series against Australia. None of their internationals are going to be about. They needed to find someone. So Shakib is going to be that man. So, yeah, bit going on there.
Yeah. And he's also weirdly going to be the MP for Taunton Dean. They've inked a deal. They're going to parachute him into that seat.
And in Divi 2, the race is tightening as well. Sussex are only 6 points ahead of Middlesex. Lots of draws there in the second division. Peter Hanscom, another 100. You can't bloody stop, final word friend Peter Hanscom, averaging 74 in his last 10 hits down at Grace Road. And sadly, there was that draw, the unsafe pitch, with Northants and Gloucestershire down at Bristol, and that's a problem. That's an issue. So because the cricket regulator,
a freak's problem.
Well, the cricket regulator are going to step in there, and I don't know what happens, but I mean, I'm increasingly worried about Gloucestershire. Like that, I don't know if there's going to be a domino that falls that sets the whole thing in motion. Well, anyway. Let's not finish that thought. Jeff, let's finish this show, though. It has been the Final Word weekly edition, the one that goes out in the start of the week. There'll be story time after the test match. There'll be daily shows between times. They'll be hosted by Cam Ponsonby, Daniel Norcross, and myself from the Kia Oval in South London starting on Friday. But that's it for us now. Season 16, episode 36. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of our Patreon team. Thank you to everyone who said nice things to me after Sunday. That was pretty cool. A bunch of our patrons got in touch who've been following that ongoing storyline about my inability to reach 3 figures. That was a nice thing. And thank you for listening today. This has been us. Goodbye for now.
All right. See ya.